FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is July 24th, 2020. Well, lots going on in China. As you know, the dam could collapse very quickly. Flooding, really 1,000-year floods taking place in China now, and all of their inferior substandard dams are really making it even worse, exacerbating the situation. Well, China has been at war with the United States for 30 years now, and the United States, up until recently, either didn't notice or didn't care, or perhaps they were part of the plan, our leadership. I'll leave that for you to decide. But the gloves are off. The war is on. What's going to happen next? I'd like to get your opinion. What do you think about China as a threat to the United States? Is this just another instance where we need to have an adversary so that we have meaning and relevancy? Or is China a real threat? Why don't you email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. That's kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, we've got retired General Robert S. Spalding with us now. General, you were in the Air Force for more than 25 years of service, for which we thank you. You're former China strategist for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and you've done so much more. In addition, unusually, you are fluent in Mandarin, so you actually understand to some extent how the Chinese think, what their motivation is. So we thank you for coming on. Again, we thank you for your service to the country. Your new book is Stealth War: How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept, or perhaps were complicit and part of the takeover. Where are we now in our relations with China?
Well, in the first quarter of 2018, we really started focusing on implementing the national security strategy that came out in December of 2017. And so there's the recent decision by the UK to ban Huawei really demonstrates the effectiveness of that diplomatic effort that's been ongoing for over 2 years. I think where we are today is we're having an accelerated decoupling. I think that was always built into the strategy. I think what is surprising is how fast it's actually happened, and it's primarily because the Chinese Communist Party saw any kind of reform or change of their economic system that would allow for more market-based decisions in China and less, power of state-owned enterprises, just something that the Chinese Communist Party wasn't willing to undertake. And as a result, realized that, they were going to have to basically deal with the consequences of that decision. And so ultimately they decided to isolate themselves, but to do so on a very lengthened timeline. I think the coronavirus just accelerated that timeline in ways that, neither side probably could have foreseen.
Right. And so I'm glad you brought up the coronavirus. It appears to an untrained observer like myself, out of the know, that China effectively weaponized the coronavirus. They knew it was coming. They were complicit with the WHO, the World Health Organization, in downplaying its severity. They cut off intra-China travel, but they still allowed all the people to go travel around the world and infect the world with it. Now, there's no telling, trying to quarantine a virus is kind of a fool's errand. One is as contagious as COVID-19, but nonetheless, they seem to have deliberately infected the rest of the world. And now China, in my opinion, is rapidly becoming a pariah nation. Don't you think?
It is. And, I was in Europe last year in the fall, talked to a lot of people in the German government, the EU and NATO, and they were all very focused on the Chinese Communist Party as a threat to their democracies and the multilateral institutions, particularly in Europe. I think, again, the decision, the UK and many of the allies and partners to ban Huawei and to do other things like banning investments in industrial companies like Germany has recently done, and take other measures to protect their society, I think just indicates that the message that the United States is sending, which is, the international order that we built after war, democratic principles, free trade, rule of law, human rights, civil liberties, is not the vision for the international order that the Chinese Communist Party wants to see come out of this between the U.S. and China. They're actually trying to create a world that's more that more caters to authoritarian regimes. And so, the U.S. message is democracies need to work together to stop this rising tide of authoritarianism. And I think they have gotten the message, and the U.S. is being successful in turning the tide.
Yeah, it's fascinating because a few months ago, before the coronavirus, it seemed like an uphill battle. All of a sudden, the virus and the CCP's reaction to it has been just lifted the veil, red-pilled the entire world about what these people are about. And then they passed the national security law targeting Hong Kong, going back on their one country, two systems pledge that they pledged to Britain and effectively the world. And now Hong Kong is going to be just like China. What they weren't expecting was a decisive action by the United States to kind of kneecap them. And they just said, all right, well, hey, you do that. Hong Kong no longer has a special relationship with the United States, no more tariff-free goods back and forth, and no more effective implicit backing of the Hong Kong dollar by virtue of its peg to the U.S. dollar. And they were somehow surprised about this, General.
Well, and they will continue to feign surprise at every policy that's meant to prevent their further infiltration of our economy and society, because that's part of their shtick. That's how they essentially try to position themselves and dominate the narrative and try to make themselves look as like the victim, when in fact it's all the result of decisions that they have deliberately made to promote their continued, authoritarian, or some would say totalitarian rule in China. So it's to be expected. We're going to see more of that. That nevertheless, this strategic agreement that they signed with Iran indicates that they realize that their future actually lies with Iran, Russia, North Korea, and nations such as those, and then other emerging market countries associated with the Belt and Road Initiative, while in the U.S., we actually are aligning ourselves more with developed economies and functioning democracies.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. I'm sure you're a big reader of the Epoch Times, and they're among media outlets, probably single-handedly the most important outlet taking on China. And they get a lot of insider, a lot of data information from people within the PRC, and probably have enunciated the best understanding of what's really driving China, and that is world domination. We see it now. We've seen all these academics be exposed in the United States, 50 some odd academics who are taking money from China. We see now resistance to the Confucius societies that they've endowed on numerous college campuses around the country, where they're not espousing the views of Confucius, they're espousing the views of Mao Zedong. So this kind of took off. It really has almost got a life of its own now, General, is what I'm saying. The momentum behind it, and the Chinese Communist Party is in a really precarious position right now, aren't they?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Silver One Resources is an exploration and development company backed by strategic investors Eric Sprott and SSR Mining. At Silver One's Candelaria Mine project in Nevada, there is already a historic resource estimated at 127 million ounces of silver, which Silver One is developing and advancing. The company's Phoenix Silver project, located within the Arizona Silver Belt, is an early-stage exploration project on which native silver vein fragments have been discovered near surface. One grab sample assayed an astounding 14,688 ounces per ton. Yes, that's right, ounces, not grams. Silver One has tremendous exploration potential, is extremely leveraged to the price of silver, and is cashed up and poised to increase shareholder value. Silver One trades in New York under the ticker SLVRF and in Toronto under the ticker SVE. To learn more, go to silverone.com. That's silverone.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, they are. And the fact that they've changed into this, wolf warrior diplomacy and this more aggressive form of disinformation campaigns and influence to be more like what the Russians do really isn't helping matters. And I doubt that you're going to see much of a change. What Xi Jinping brought into the Chinese Communist Party in China in 2013 is really a return to Mao Zedong type, politics, which is much more kind of Marxist, Leninist, with Chinese characteristics oriented. And the Chinese characteristics is really about the use of capital to create, financial incentives that induce people to, be more cooperative, whether they are the head of a Chinese state-owned enterprise or the head of Nike. So, and it's a challenge for democracies when you have your corporations that are supposed to be, standing up for the founding principles of the nation, actually, more promoting the founding principles of the Chinese Communist Party, through their economic and financial and trade relationships around the world. So this is the main reason that, the Chinese Communist Party is the most, I think, virulent existential threat the United States has ever faced, because primarily they have adapted the system that we built, the open, system, to be more conducive to promoting their brand of authoritarianism and getting companies, corporate America, Wall Street, through financial and economic relationships, but more importantly, harnessing the power of Silicon Valley and data to really drive their systems approach.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And really, the world's wise to it now. I think we've come so far in so short a time. We saw the trade deal looked like they were negotiating and actually were going to do something. But now, as usual, trust but verify. Well, we're not verifying too good here because they're just not doing it. But, where do we go next, really? Because this can't be just a one-shot deal here. It's got to be ongoing, consistent, and determined. And there's no backing off. Oh, one other thing I wanted to just mention is Attorney General Barr called out all these corporations for their, abdication of values of freedom and free markets and all that, and really read them the riot act, if you will.
Yeah, I think what's happened in the federal government, it's a big, I tell people it's a big ship with a very small rudder. Departments and agencies are starting to get on board with going after Chinese Communist Party influence in the United States, chiefly led by State Department and their diplomatic efforts, but, very closely behind is DOJ and FBI to really focus on the infiltration and espionage going on in our country. U.S. Trade Representative, DOD is kind of lagging right now because it doesn't understand the nature of the threat, which is, as you said, much more of an economic threat than a military threat. But needless to say, we need to find a path in the military to effective deterrence that's efficient with resources, freeing up, those resources to be put towards infrastructure, manufacturing, STEM education, and science and technology research. And then you have, departments and agencies like Commerce and Treasury that, have 1 feet, kind of in the China engagement camp and 1 feet in the China decoupling camp. And that's what really makes it difficult, because that perpetuates things like Chinese companies having access to U.S. retirement funds to grow their portfolio, in spite of the fact that money goes to the Chinese Communist Party through the People's Bank of China. And, things like, allowing the Huawei to cooperate with Qualcomm, so Qualcomm can sell chips that operate on Huawei's, 5G network. So these are the kinds of challenges that we have, in terms of the corporate and Wall Street, representatives are trying to ensure that China still has access to both technology and capital.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree with you more. Well, I think we'll leave it at that. Really appreciate you coming on, General. It's really a serious problem. Needs to be sounded out. Again, just tell us your book, where we find it, and where we find you on the web.
Yeah, so there's some good information out there. My book, Stealth War, How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. It's all the major book-selling sites. You can find it on my website, generalspalding.com. That's Spalding with no U, Spalding. I'm on Twitter at Robert_Spalding. And then Jamestown Foundation, which, was started in the Cold War to, interview and put out information about Soviet dissidents, has started a new site that's kind of based on my book that really gives you up-to-date information on this competition between the U.S. and China. It's called stealth-war.org. So I encourage you to go there and look at articles. So thanks again for the opportunity.
All right. And thank you, and wish the best of luck. Any questions, comments, KL@KerryLutz.com. Go to the site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Get your free newsletter. General, good luck on the book, and thanks for your service.
Thank you so much.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.